Hello, everyone. So we're going to keep this very conversational, and I'm going to do as little talking as possible. Our panelists have already been having quite the dialogue, and as they said earlier, we'd love for this to be interactive. So I actually think, as opposed to doing a Q&A at the end, but my name is Ariana Fowler. I work at ConsenSys Social Impact. And I'll actually have everyone do a quick round of introductions, who they are, where they're based, if they're based anywhere, and their organization, what their organization does. And then I have a swath of questions, but I'm sure it'll be a lot more exciting. So go ahead.
Okay, my name's Sweetnam. I'm the Director of Inclusion for a company called ObjectTech Group. We provide self-sovereign digital identity platform. The first large-scale outing of that will be providing gateless immigration in Dubai, but my job is, as the Director of Inclusion in 30-odd years within the humanitarian development space, is to bring the advantages of this platform to a wider audience, to a social inclusion audience.
My name is Tay. I'm the founder of a tech company called Tykn. It's based in the Netherlands, and we are innovating in the digital identity space. We work with the Dutch Red Cross and one government in the Middle East to bring the concepts of self-sovereign identity and financial inclusion.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Leila Salehi. I'm a project manager with the UN. I've worked in the Middle East and West Africa, mostly on job creation and education for refugees and IDPs, host communities. And the focus mostly is on entrepreneurship and innovation technology to be utilized for education and employment.
My name is Meredith Kravitz. I'm the ecosystem manager at ID 2020. We are a public-private partnership focused on bringing digital identity solutions to the 1.1 billion people on Earth who currently live without any form of legal identity. And we're working with our partners in both the public and private sector to make that happen.
Perfect. And a quick word on ConsenSys Social Impact. So ConsenSys is a large Ethereum-based blockchain technology company, and our team does use case development, research and design, and product implementation with clients such as the UN, the State Department, large NGOs such as the World Wildlife Fund, and small startups. So the first question that we have, more of a statement. Can you elaborate on your greatest hope for digital identity, as well as your greatest frustration with the current digital identity landscape?
My hope is that we will see self-owned, self-operated, permissioned identity rolling into all corners of the world for all people, as a tool, an everyday tool that we all use, all have access to, for whatever utility you decide to put to it. My greatest fear, probably that we'll get steamrolled by big data, I think, or big data companies. I think, as we were talking about before, that is probably beginning. I think we make enough noise to be troublesome.
When you say big data, who do you mean?
I couldn't possibly name people like Facebook and Google and so on. That would be untoward. But I think there is a whole industrial complex built up on data oiling the wheels of commerce. And we stand foursquare against that business model.
Yeah, so you talked about the hope, I'll talk about the frustrations. I think one of the challenges that we face as a startup is actually education. Educating our partners, whether it's NGOs or governments, on the importance of privacy and security in building identity management systems. And even when you do a proof of concept or an MVP, just incorporate it at your lowest expectations. And the second thing that frustrates us is, some companies or some programs are using the refugee environment to test out new technologies, and that's something unacceptable and unethical.
And Tay, could you elaborate actually a bit for those who aren't familiar with your story and your journey to Tykn and how it's a bit personal?
So I am the founder of Tykn.tech, but I'm actually a Syrian refugee. I was born in Kuwait, and during the 1990, the Gulf War erupted and the birth registries got destroyed. So until today, I don't have a birth certificate. Upon applying for asylum, I applied while I lived in the Netherlands. So I came to the Netherlands in 2010 as what we call a kennis-immigrant or a knowledge worker. And I speak Dutch, I write Dutch. I have driving license, a house, a dog, and just a normal guy. In 2014, I applied for asylum. Realistically, as an identity management system, it must identify me that I live in the country, and my process must not take more than 15 days because there's no KYC to be done on me. It took me 2 years to finish. And during those 2 years, I started up Tykn in the refugee camp. So we're the startup weekend winners in Utrecht in the Netherlands last year. And today we have 2 government contracts, and we work with the Dutch Red Cross in the island of St. Martin to rebuild the digital identity sector there.
As somebody who's working there on a daily basis with refugees who lost their documentations, whether it is their birth certificate or documentation for their housing, which is now, for example, in Mosul, or their education certificates for a lot of Syrian refugees who moved to other countries, and then they are barred from continuing their studies or applying for jobs. It's my hope to have better system, more creative system, to be able to basically enable these people to access to these documentations, and then to be able to basically have a normal life, if it's and that helps them also in their reintegration in the societies that they go on to live.
So I think my greatest hope is that as a global society, we will coalesce around a few key principles related to digital identity. One being that identity is a core fundamental human right, and always going back to that. The second is that users should have control over their identity and over their data, and that privacy should be sort of top of mind and of the highest caliber possible within the range of technologies that are available. In terms of my greatest fear, I think I would maybe go a little bit further than Tay and get a little more dystopian and say, what keeps me up at night is the possibility of one day implementing a program where we're essentially issuing virtual yellow stars to individuals, and that one day this can be used and turned around and targeted to vulnerable minorities, whatever that type of minority might be. So.
And can you, touching upon the 3 principles that you mentioned in the work that ID 2020 is doing now, which have you seen, which of the 3 have you seen garner the most support and the most tension? So
I think the user control aspect has definitely brought the most tension. I think privacy is becoming far more prevalent as a topic, and now we're speaking about it in more concrete terms. But I think it's the first principle, the idea that having a digital identity, having an identity, and being able to assert that identity is a core right that every human being on earth should be able to access and should be able to implement in their day-to-day lives. And I think we're getting a lot of traction on that, but I'd like to keep coming back to that point because I think everything else flows from there.
And so speaking about principles, and we have a mix of people in the audience. We have practitioners, we have people who are both refugees and practitioners, we have maybe policymakers. What are some design principles and design considerations that should be taken into account when people are thinking about creating a digital identity, thinking about implementing a digital identity? How do you even structure the thought process?
One of the things that we're reading about now, or I'm seeing quite a lot of more in the past few months, is user-centric processes. And For crying out loud, have we not learned anything? I've been in this business 30 years. This must be the third or fourth time I've heard about user. It's all about the end user. I have this business background as well, where it all has to be about the end user, actually quite often about the intermediary. But it's having this human-led design focus which enables you to meet needs and then enables you to personalize people's experience.
Why do you think it's failed? You said you've seen it multiple times.
I think it's being relearned by each new generation, and it's just a moment for me. It has to be about people. And it has to be about their journey. It has to be about what they need to use their locker for, whether you're going to Dubai with us or whether you're having an identity on San Martin with Tykn. It's about what you do with it and about enabling your life, not me enabling what I think your life ought to be.
So I'm going to take a crazy guess and say that everyone here probably agrees with that already and probably knows that. I don't know if anyone would dissent because we have opted into coming to this. How do we convey that message to those that may be resistant to it or those that we see hold the power in terms of design? Maybe money, just power?
Yeah, I would introduce a new concept today, and it's called innovation without permission. Never wait for permission to innovate and to do something, whether it's in the digital identity or any type of space, even the money space. So I always remind people where Tykn started from. A room in a refugee camp, which is actually a prison. The room I was sitting in, there was a guy who was waiting for his Lockerbie case back in the past. So the environment we were in was never comfortable. Knowing that, I came from my own house in The Hague, the city of justice. So there was absolutely no justice in that. And I didn't wait for the Dutch government to tell us, yeah, we want to include people in Africa. Or I didn't wait for ID 2020 to come and say, yeah, we want to bring financial inclusion. We did this ourselves because we know that identity is a problem. And for the lady that was here from UNHCR just a few minutes ago, with all my respect to her, whatever UNHCR does in Lebanon, I lived in Lebanon for 20 years. I was raised there, I did my school, I did my university. Nothing will happen without the approval of the government. Refugee crisis in Lebanon is nothing about us doing something. It's about the government itself. They don't want to help the refugees, the Syrian refugees specifically there. So don't wait and don't take permissions. As Mike says, just do it.
I would say, just connecting to what you were mentioning, as UN or international organization, NGOs, you always have to work with the government, and it's like the political aspect comes into mind, and that's that makes everything complicated. It's much easier on the innovation side, and if you are working on apps and databases and solutions, but then using it and utilizing it, the political part is very complicated, and that a lot of advocacy is needed there.
Well, I'd say I'm with Tay. I say don't wait for ID 2020. We're a collaborative organization. We're an alliance. We encourage you to join, but we really hope that that everyone starts taking these questions seriously and implementing them and engaging with us in any way that they see fit. In terms of key design elements, I guess I bring it back to risk, and I don't really mean technical risk, because risk is ultimately derived not from sort of the technical innovations, but from the human beings who are willing to exploit the vulnerabilities either in the technology and within the populations. And so, like Prime Minister Papandreou mentioned, we need to engage with the political process, because that is where that conversation is happening.
If we do the same old thing in the same old way and just digitize it, we're going to get the same old crap out, basically. So, there needs to be technology is not a solution to a political problem. It can make people's lives better, it can make things slightly more acceptable for certain parts of constituents, but it is not a universal panacea. It's a tool. Self-sovereign identity, I think, will be a very, or is a very powerful tool, but it can't exist in a political vacuum. But I do agree with Tykn. If Ford had, what did he used to say? If I'd asked people what they want, they'd have said faster horses, not a car. And I think we're in one of those sort of moments. Get on, do it, sort it out, but put it into a context and do it with, not for people.
I fully agree with Peter. What I think, my comment was more focused on when we think about risk within the context of digital identity. Often we fail to see the forest, and so the forest is the larger risk piece, and that involves well beyond certain technical mitigation efforts.
I have two questions. The first one is regarding privacy. Are these fears exaggerated? Are we perhaps just playing along to the fear-mongering? Is there perhaps a discussion that needs to be had about whether or not privacy really is a concern? I mean, it is a concern, but how serious is it? And is it actually getting in the way of actual innovation? That's the first question. And the second one has to do with the discussion about politics. Most innovations and advances occurred ahead of politics. Politics followed. So I would argue that the discussion with politicians has to happen, but I think actually it's the other way around. The politicians will catch up with the technologies. So I think there's also a discussion to be had about move fast and break things. I think that was what the founder of Facebook said. So I think very often we exaggerate the role of politics, and I think we perhaps are exaggerating the role of privacy as well. Not to diminish it, but I think there needs to be a balance as to what is actually dangerous, what is actually influential, and how technology is actually a change agent. Not side by side with politics, but actually several steps ahead of politics.
So I'll answer your question based on the follow-up from Meredith about her nightmare of the waking up and finding people being rated with the golden stars. In World War II, there was a catastrophic event where the Jewish people were prosecuted, and we all know what happened to them. Nobody questions or nobody knows or even dare to answer how did this happen. It happened because of a technology, and that technology is called the punch card machine. So the Nazi party had a share in an American company that designed the punch card machine. And they brought them to the Netherlands to design the perfect civil registry system to deliver inclusion services for the Dutch community. What they failed in that design was privacy. Because one guy, something flipped in his head and decided to open that registry and find out not only where Jewish people lived, who did they marry, and go back in bloodline and identify every single one of them. We don't want that to repeat in history again. And it's happening today with the Rohingyas. No matter what you do with identities, if it's paper-based or digital, if your Rohingya name is Muhammad, he's a Muslim. That cannot happen again. And that cannot happen with the Syrian people. What's on the board on the moderator name? It's Tay, but that's not my real name. That's what everybody knows me about. 10,000 people can stand in line here and vouch that this is Tay speaking, but they don't know my real name. If we are able to do that in real life, we are able to bring it into the digital world. And I agree with you totally that politics will follow, and that's why I said innovation without permission. Don't wait for them.
Yeah. I'm going to add to that and say, and this is very much a personal opinion, move fast and break things is not, I think, an ethical path for humanitarian interventions. I think when you're dealing with the lives of refugees and the lives of the most vulnerable populations on Earth, that is not a model we should be following. We have to be far more cautious.
Yes, 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 and no. I think yes. We self-sovereign identity as a concept and as a reality is now out there. So in a way, we've done the moving. The question is now how and where and so on. That is applied, and that has to go into. We have to, whether we like it or not, fit into legal and regulatory jurisdictions. It's just the way in which the world works. If you're lucky in the UK, where we've got a couple of regulators, that's fine. You go to Australia, they've got 7 regulators, and God knows how many America's got. But I mean, but you still have to fit into all of those environments. So, yes, move fast, break a few things, then take a deep breath and get on with it. So I think yes, you're both you're all three of you actually quite right in that sense. And I think yes, privacy, an extraordinary stark example of how it was done and the role of technology, and yeah, and that can't be allowed to happen again. And sadly, the politics of the world now has taken a swing to where that feels to me like a very real possibility that I may see in what time I have left.
It's a very short question, but what's your view on the standards that's currently being created? Like you say, go break things, go innovate, but like you still need some type of standards and identity to make this even work. So I just wonder what's your view on that?
Actually, standards that are today available in the digital identity, let's say, market, they came from the fact of innovating. We talk about, for example, the DID standards, decentralized identifiers. That is a way to issue credentials or to issue your name, your first name, your last name, your date of birth, based on cryptographic standards that were designed by the W3C. IBM, Microsoft, and large organizations are adopting these standards today. So I say there is hope, but there is a long way to go. And if we don't do something about them, then the world and no one will know that they exist. So why are we talking today? Self-sovereign identity was mentioned at least 10 times in this conversation. And I'm sure it is a new word for many people in this room.
They're vital. For us, slightly different. So 5 of my colleagues from ObjectTech are in Moscow as we speak, sitting in ISO standard development, TC 307. We convene the identity working group. I think that's the right terminology.
Can you explain what ISO is for those? What ISO is?
ISO is the International Standards Organization. Almost everything we have in life is standard. These will work on an ISO system. The electricity worked on an ISO system. Probably the raking of the seats and the cushions in the seats are all sort of ISO regulated. So for us, that's around interoperability. If we want to push this, there has to be an ecosystem. It can't just be ObjectTech and it can't just be Tykn. It needs to be the both of us and members of ID 2020 and everybody else who's going to come afterwards. And there has to be a way of us functioning together. So if ObjectTech disappears, then Tykn has to be able to, with a minimum of fuss, pick up the people, because you can't have your entire life in a locker and suddenly you can't use it. It just can't. It won't function like that. So if we believe in the value that it can bring right across the globe, it has to be done against a set of standards, and it has to be done against a set of ethical principles as well, not just technical standards. So we use the Windover principles, and then there are the World Bank 10 principles. They're virtually the same, just expressed slightly differently.
One of the biggest issues in digital identity at the moment is, as you've been saying, self-sovereign identity on a blockchain. But a blockchain is supposed to be immutable, as in it's there forever. And the concept of a refugee putting their identity on a blockchain, which is there forever, could well be problematic, right? You know, as much as I'm a big fan of technology myself, you know, that might be a big issue. India has just sort of put into law the fact that the entire population should have their identity on this database, which I'm pretty sure it's already been hacked. It's very, very problematic. So I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on how we're going to be able to protect people. You said earlier about the issues about big data. There's lots of big companies who've got lots of big data on us, of course, we know this. Refugees need identity to have access to services, and how do we balance that with this problem of security and also this conversation that is about moving everything to the blockchain, which is there forever, basically?
I'll keep it short. First thing that we need to do today is Google the principles of self-sovereign identity. The principles say nothing about blockchain or immutability or anything else. Second thing that we need to do today, and that's my takeaway for you guys, is to review our grammar lessons. Because we hear often that we are building identities on blockchain. But grammatically, that is wrong. The concept of building on blockchain doesn't exist. You're anchoring on a blockchain, or you're hooking something on a blockchain. What do you hook? You're not gonna hook a copy of your driving license, or your shoe size, or your favorite pet. You're gonna hook what we call a digital fingerprint, a cryptographic hash that will take maybe 10 quantum computers to reverse that hash and give you the original text that it designed. What self-sovereign identity needs today to succeed is what we call a decentralized key management system. A key that you own, you sign your own ID. It's like a key for your house. You forget the key of the house. It's like your phone mobile number. You issue your own mobile number and you don't go to T-Mobile or any other operator to acquire it. And as you are moving in life, people are signing on that mobile number. So blockchain is more of a hype in that sense, combined to identity. Personally, I don't believe it can bring much value, but for financial applications, cryptocurrencies in specific, it is a whole new discussion, and I think that needs like 10 panels by itself.
Yeah, like what he said. But if you put anything on the blockchain, it's there forever, as the questioner says. So the answer to that is don't put it on the blockchain. So if anybody says we put your data on the blockchain, say thank you, but no thank you politely, and turn around and run away. ObjectTech system is that you have a locker, it's sharded, it's sent all over the place, and we use the blockchain for one thing and one thing only, and that's for verification of data. There is no data exchange, there is a hash process, which is a little bit like a fingerprint. So we all have fingerprints, they're all different, but if you have my fingerprint, you cannot tell what I look like, you can't tell my gender, my sex, where I come, my nationality, anything about me, but it is a unique identifier. And one of the questions, if you want to get into it, is around, okay, are hashes quantum safe? I'm told it depends on the algorithm, and in ObjectTech we already employ quantum cryptographers. If you want an unfathomable discussion with somebody, you can talk to our quantum cryptographers, because I don't understand a word they say. But it is all about future-proof. This is about what's coming down the road, and it's about trying to meet, at least at the technological level, those risks, so that your data is yours, it belongs to you. If you want somebody to see it, you give them permission to see the bit that you want them to see. So if you go into a club and you've got to prove that you're 18, you don't want them to see your driving license, your name, your address, your picture. You simply want them to know you're over 18 and that they can trust that data. And the immutability of the blockchain provides us with that trust framework, and that's all it does.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you to the panelists, and yeah.